All right, good Monday morning, Cougs. Hope everybody had a great 3-day weekend. Enjoyed the 4th of July, stayed safe, everybody's healthy. Good to have you with us on Daily Coug Connect. My name's Don Reed. If you've not been with us before, glad you're joining us, and welcome back to those of you that continue to join in and participate. Really enjoy having you with us. So my activity over the 4th was low-key, did a little bit of cleaning around the house, and my wife and I have been wanting to watch Hamilton for a long time. Disney Plus is finally streaming that, and awesome production. If you've not seen it, I went in I'm not a big, huge Broadway kind of person, but really fantastic production, fairly close to some of the history that took place with our founding fathers. Interesting take on it, and the performances are outstanding. Hope you get a chance to see it sometime. Anyway, today's topic is tough conversations. Start with yourself. This is coming from information that I've been exposed to in my past. I'm certified to teach the Crucial Conversations course. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through today. And as we go along, I'll try to share a couple of the key highlights, talk about some examples. And I would like you to think about in your life, here we are relaxed watching, Daily Coug Connect broadcast, and we're sitting hopefully in our offices or at home office. All is well with the world, I hope. And it's really hard to think about tough conversations, but as soon as you do, you can start to feel the emotions inside. So I'd like you to try that for a little bit, is to picture a real tough conversation that you've either recently had or you anticipate having to have here real soon. It could be work related, could be home related. Either way, just think about those tough conversations that are very challenging, kind of spark the emotions. You start to feel something inside. I want you to think about those as we go along. So when you have some challenging conversations, it could be work related. If any of you are parents and you have teenagers, those might qualify. And if it's work related and you're talking about a coworker that you're dealing with around an issue, or maybe it's a subordinate if you're a supervisor, or if you're a subordinate and it is your supervisor that you have to have the conversation with, all of those fall into what I call kind of spinning your wheels. Sometimes you take a try at having the tough conversation, just doesn't seem to go anywhere, or maybe you're afraid of having the conversation, so it just kind of spins there and comes back up in your life, a couple weeks later, those types of things. So they're definitely draining. Think of all the energy, just like this picture of the wheel stuck in the mud, the vehicle stuck in the mud. It's just draining energy-wise, and we want to find ways to move past that type of situation. So right out of the gate, I want to share this is from a company called Vital Smarts. They're based out of the Salt Lake City area. They've put out their book several years ago called Crucial Conversations. So this is the model that they constructed. One thing I like about the model is they didn't go out there and just kind of put a hypothesis out there and just say, well, do these things, do these things, do these things, and kind of built a flow. What they did was went out to a variety of organizations, and they would have conversations with the management teams and with people within the organizations. And this was all industries all across North America. And what they did was develop their model based on the information they found. So they were trying to look at, okay, what really works? And they would talk to the people that they'd go into the organization, go, who in your organization do people tend to go to? And it doesn't matter what the issue is. This person is the go-to person and just always seems to have great conversations, promotes dialogue and interaction, and people just feel safe talking with that person. And those people were readily identified. And you probably know somebody in your life, you just think about them, you go to, oh yeah, I would go to this person because I know we'll have a great conversation, even if it's dealing with some tough issues. So based on that, they constructed this model. It is, at first glance, if you've never seen it before, kind of complex. Don't want you to memorize it at all. Matter of fact, we're not going to deal with the last part, and we're not going to deal with the middle part in this series. What I do want to work on is that very first part, because that's the part we really have most control over, is work on me first. 3 elements to it: get unstuck, start with heart, and master my stories. So I'll deal with get unstuck today. Next week, I believe I'm on the schedule, I believe Thursday, we'll do the start with heart and give you some of the tips and techniques out of that section. And then the final one is master my stories, and that'll be 2 weeks from now. So getting started with this one. What makes a conversation crucial? Well, one thing I think that really starts to define it for me, and you'll see it on the model here in just a moment, is the emotional aspect. Anytime you think of a conversation that really triggers some emotions in you, whether it's anxiety or kind of anger or just frustration, any kind of emotional trigger that sets you off, it's probably getting close to a crucial conversation. But the way they define it is you have opposing opinions. Even if it's with your teenager, hey, take the garbage out. I don't want to take the garbage out. You've got opposing opinions. And they may not say, I don't want to take the garbage out, but think about all the things they do to avoid taking the garbage out. So internally, they're thinking, I don't want to take the garbage out. Strong emotions about it. You get upset as a parent, you get upset as a coworker, whatever it is, you feel it inside somehow. And then there is some kind of a payoff. Now, the garbage going out, that's probably not a huge issue as far as the stakes that are involved here. Although if you mistake the garbage out and it doesn't make it to the garbage truck and it starts piling up over time, it does start to get a little bit bigger and stinkier. So it's never a perfect isosceles triangle here. It's, these ebb and flow, but these are the 3 key elements that we want to set as the foundational on the whole thing. Now, here's where I want to have you think a little bit, get ready to share some things on the chat line, because I want you to think about when you were a kid, what did you do to get your way? You wanted to go to the county fair because you dreamed of it as a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old. You could just see that big cotton candy thing. You really wanted to go to the fair and all the lights and activity and everything else. And mom or dad said, no, we're not going this year, whatever the reason was. But as a kid, you were going, I can't go to the fair. And what did you do to get your way? Maybe it wasn't the fair. Maybe it was something else around the family. Think about that. And I want you to jump on the chat line, be brave, and share what were some of the things that maybe you did as a kid to get your way. So I'll just stop here for a moment and just hop on the chat line and throw some of those things out there. Verbal negotiation and using value statements. Okay, so you negotiated. That's great, Jim. All right, Julie, get my sister to ask. Oh, there you go, teaming up. So get the sister to ask. Try to negotiate, plead incessantly. Any others? Anybody throw a tantrum? It's okay. There are others of us that did. Try to plead my case as logically as I could. Try to outlogic a parent. Doesn't work usually very well. Play that one parent against the other. Ask the other parent. Yeah, bargaining, negotiating, you bet. Well, if you take me to the fair, I'll make sure to do, I'll take the dog for a walk every day next week. That kind of thing. All right. Any others out there? Those are all great. Don't see any tantrums or anything. So apparently all of you were very well behaved young people. I love it. I can't remember that I threw a tantrum at any point in time. There was one time I tried resorting to crying, but I'm not a very good fake crier, so I'm sure they saw right through that one. All right. So there's probably other forms. If you have kids, you know what it looks like too, right? Because not only did they do it, you can think back when you were a kid and probably did it. We can typically bucket these into 2 separate ways of approaching getting our way, if you think about it. Now, fast forward to now I'm an adult. What do you do as an adult to get your way? Now, I'm not going to ask you to throw those on the chat line, but I bet some of them are adult versions of how we tried to do it as a kid, as a 5-year-old, as a 7-year-old. Probably same approach or strategy. We just have learned to be a little smoother with it, or a little more adult-like with it, perhaps. And what we tend to see then, trickery and misdirection. Yes, sleight of hand, and try to fool them. The two buckets that the folks at VitalSmart tend to bucket these behavioral responses that we do when we're met with an obstacle. Sometimes we go to silence. So, I'm going to shut down. I'm going to withhold information. I'm not going to play ball with you, whatever it may be. Those are forms of shutting down, all right, and pulling away. Does it resolve the issue? Not very well, typically, right? The other one, now they term it violence, and they have for the 15, 20 years that they've had the book out on the market. Now, I realize that in today's day and age, with what we see in the news, sometimes we're not talking about extreme forms of violence where people are pulling guns out and going back into the workplace, that kind of thing. It's the acting out. It's the stomping of the feet. It's the verbal aggression or challenging, those types of things. That are much more outward and at the other person in trying to get your way. So here's our two buckets that they tend to fall in as far as behavioral stuff. Now, either way, do you really win? Do you really get a productive long-term relationship as you move through whatever the tough issue is? Probably not. Whether it's holding back or lashing out, going after the person, going for the jugular, that kind of thing, probably not going to be good for the long-term relationship that you might find it. So whether it's, once again, within the family, other family members, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, kids, whatever it may be, or in the workplace. So is there a better way? Instead of getting stuck in the mud, can we look at maybe, hey, productive dialogue? So the starting place here is breaking the word down. It's got Greek root in it. So di meaning two. So there's two people at least involved. And logi, which is logic or trying to think through things and have productive conversations. So dialogue, two people having good conversation and listening to one another as we go forward. So the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, was start with self, get unstuck. A couple key things that we can look at here. Unbundle, meaning look at the situation. Think about your role in it. What are some of the things that are in your way right now that are frustrating and fall into these challenging or tough or crucial conversations? So the first thing we look at is it a content issue? Am I at odds with the other person as far as the content of the wording of a report, of the issue that's on the table? The schedule is not flexible and we need to change that. So those are content issues. Think about all the work issues that you deal with. It also could involve with family members as well. But is it strictly the content? Is it what they said or how they said it, or you're in disagreement with what their point of view is on the whole thing? So that's the content. Is it a pattern of behavior? So not as much about the content, but it's the same thing that keeps coming up that gets in the way. And maybe it's a particular behavior. Maybe it's avoidance of an issue. Maybe it's not dealing with the real issue. So is it a repetitive thing that we keep seeing? And that's what I want to address, not the content so much, but in this case, it'd be, Don, I've noticed that you've done this last month when we had this conversation or at this meeting, and last week you did it again, and be very specific as you can as far as what the pattern looks like. Last one is it starting to is it about our relationship? Now, the first two definitely are involved with impacting on the relationship, but is it more about how we go about viewing our relationship, bringing ourselves into the relationship, and how we try to interact with the other person. So is that the real issue that is at hand here? If it's with a spouse, and I've got a written permission note from my wife to be able to use stories like this, because we've been married 45 years, and you don't go 45 years living with another person, especially her living with me. I'm sure I have stepped in it many times. So what the issue is there is the, dear, I want to talk with you about, because this is starting to damage our relationship. When you do these things, this causes me to think you don't care about me, or you don't trust me, or you don't, whatever the issue may be, but it's around the relationship now. Once again, it could be a pattern of behavior that you've seen, but it's starting to impact on the relationship. By the time it gets to relationship, usually it's not as much the content, although those can be the triggers that set the emotions off. But step back, step away when you've calmed down, when the mind is calmer. Is it really starting to impact on relationship? Now, there's a lot more to this. I'm going to give you some other resources here before we end our session today, but those are the things I want you to think about, not in the moment, although with skill and practice, you can draw these things into your mind to help you start thinking more logically rather than the emotions taking over. But we'll give you a couple tips in just a moment. The tips start to become the skills. Now, some we've talked about, some we have not in past Daily Coup Connects. One of the areas that I want to look at is called relational intelligence. Now, there's many things involved with relational intelligence, but it's how do you read the other person? How do I interpret what's going on? Do I develop the correct responses? So it definitely involves the emotional intelligence aspect, but it also entails personality styles and understanding differences, and those things can sometimes be back over here on this other side as far as what the issues that are the triggers initially. So relational intelligence, how do I develop that? The principles of effectiveness, we talked about very early on when we were talking about the 7 habits of highly effective people. So take a look at that, develop those things, because if you base your relationships on being effective rather than trying to win, anytime you hear your brain think anything close to, I'm going to win this, it's a losing story. You're back stuck in the mud type of thing. So principles of effectiveness. And then, as I mentioned, the crucial conversations, the book, just the book itself has great tips and techniques in it. And I'm going to show you a source for that in just a moment. So those are the areas. The first step is get unstuck. Unbundle. What is it that I'm really dealing with here? What am I responding to? Or what is the other person seeming to respond to that starts that tough dialogue or causes us to shut down or start verbally or just getting angry with each other and coming at each other? Is it the pattern, and is the relationship really starting to be at issue here? Develop the skills on the relational intelligence, principles of effectiveness, and crucial conversations. So the source, as I mentioned, comes from the book Crucial Conversations. You see the 4 authors' names at the bottom there. They've been out for about 20 years, I believe, since their first edition came out. Over 4 million copies, that's pretty good. And the good thing is you don't have to necessarily go out and buy this. You can go out on Skillsoft and look this up. So let me get over there for just a moment. Hopefully, just somebody on chat line just tell me, are you seeing my Skillsoft account on screen now? Yeah, okay, great, thank you. All right, so just up here, I've signed into my account. We go over here, we just type in the crucial conversations, do a quick search. Whoops. I got timed out. Sorry about that. That's how long ago I signed in. Just a moment. Okay, I'll try it again here. So crucial conversations. We're going to do search. Now, most of you know it defaults over here to instructor-led training, but I'm going way over here to books and click on books. And you can see we've got an 8-page Cliff Note version, kind of like what we're doing today. We've got the full book, 288 pages that you can launch and read online, and you can bookmark where you leave off and so forth. It's also got an audiobook version. There's 2 different ones here. Looks like, trying to see what the difference, oh, second edition, this one, yeah. So you're gonna want this one right here. So whichever one would be beneficial for you, just wanted to let you know that those tools and techniques are available there as well. Finally, oh, already talked about that. So just want to start moving towards closing. First of all, just thank you all for being on the chat line with us, or on the video feed today. Tomorrow, as you can see, we've got Rocky Lucas, who has presented 3 or 4 times before, and I appreciate Rocky stepping back in. He's going to do another session, and this one's on emotional wellness. So I hope you can join us Tuesday, tomorrow, at 10 o'clock for emotional wellness. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. Hope you have a great Monday.